Welcome to another episode of the iWorkinSport live interview. This is the show where we talk to accomplished sport business professionals who come here to share their knowledge, their experience, tips, and advice in order to help you succeed in your career. If we're just meeting, my name is João Pujério. I'm the founder of iWorkinSport, and I want to say a big thank you for being here with us today. And if you're coming back, you already know the drill. I will ask you to let me know where you're watching from. It's always good to know who we're talking to directly. So if you can go there and put in the comments, that would be great. Also, prepare to send your questions and comments. As you know, this is an interactive session. Of course, if this is your first time here, you do exactly the same. Okay, this is valid to you too. Just let us know, maybe in the comments, that this is your first time watching here. Today, I have the pleasure to welcome to the show Kirsty Burrows, Associate Director of Health, Medicine, and Science at the International Olympic Committee here in Lausanne, Switzerland. But before I invite Kirsty to join me, I want to say that this episode is brought to you by Mint, the leading recruitment agency for sport and entertainment in Europe. Many people may still be familiar with the name Sport Carrière, but the company recently rebranded as it expands more and more into entertainment and the international market. So, if you are someone looking for your next move in the sports industry, check out wearemint.com. The link is on the description of the video. Also, if you're a company looking for help to hire the best talent, get in touch with Mint. I'm actually working with Mint internationally, so feel free to reach out to me directly. That's it. Without further ado, let me invite Kirsty to join me right after this. There she is. Hello, Kirsty. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Joao. Lovely to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to see you too. I was planning actually to be there with you in person. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but it will be just as good. It's great to have you here. It's been a while that I've been wanting to invite you, and I'm glad that it happened. I didn't mention at the beginning, but I think I could actually start telling people that I've known you for some time now, right? That was when you did the FIFA Master. I did many years actually before you. What year was that? When did you join? When did you graduate?
I did the 2014 to 2015 Masters.
14, 15, so the 15th edition. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been some time. And you know what? Just a couple of minutes before joining, I didn't comment with you while we were talking before that. I just remembered that you were the first MC. You helped me with the first edition of the I Work in Sports in 2017. Remember that?
I do,
Since then, we've
yeah.
been working with since then we've been working with Anna Black for many years, but you were there at the beginning, so you're important story,
Basically, I did one
important
time
part.
and you were like, no, we have to change.
No. You got too busy, you got too important for it. You were awesome, and you're an important part in the I Work in Sport history. So it's even more special having you back here with us.
Thank you, Joao.
Great. Kirsty, so this is mostly about career, right? As I explained to you. So I'll ask you what I ask all my, guests, maybe to start with a summary, say a quick summary of your career. We know that you did the FIFA Master, but maybe even what you studied at university. How did you start working sport until where you are at the moment, the IOC? If you can give us a brief summary, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, growing up, the main sport that I did is not an Olympic sport, but it was ballet. And actually, I decided that I really wanted to have a career in sport. And originally, I was looking to see, okay, what kind of career would allow me to still be close to ballet, even if not a professional ballerina. And so I decided actually to do physiotherapy. So my degree was actually in physiotherapy, and then I moved to Singapore straight away after I graduated, and I was working out in Singapore. I actually started working quite quickly with the Football Association of Singapore, so working with their youth academy, working with their women's teams, and really was able to travel all over the world with football and really see how, I know it's often said as a cliche, but how really sport can overcome all manner of boundaries. It was really the limitless potential of sport to overcome so many different boundaries, be they geopolitical boundaries, be they lingual, be they cultural, etc., etc. I then moved to Italy and was working mainly with professional football in Italy, and then also after that in Doha, Qatar. So really had a very international experience as a sports physiotherapist. But what really came to mind first and foremost for me when I was working, as a physiotherapist, it's quite amazing, because oftentimes you become really a first point of call for athletes. And what I started to understand and started to experience is that while sport has, I think, such an incredible potential to do so much good, so much good. There are many areas through which we have to better protect the health and well-being of people within the context of sport. And there are many areas within the context of sport which can present critical risks to athletes and to health and well-being. So we know that, for example, participating in sport is really good for you. It's really good for health, well-being on the individual level, on the interpersonal level, on the community level. But just because sport can be so good doesn't make it necessarily so unless we build in those safeguards. So I started to really look at athletes instead of being a patient. And I think we're quite guilty of this quite a lot of the time when you work in sort of sports medicine and in the clinical sector. You're looking at an ankle, right? Or you're looking at a knee. But instead, I really started to look back and look at the more holistic perspective of the athletes as a person. And then really what was coming to the forefront for me was how particularly things such as mental health, well-being, interpersonal violence, and the interplay with the sports culture was something that was really, really of high interest to me. And I'm a great believer that we can protect people, we can safeguard their rights, sport can be an avenue through which we can actually practice our rights, and actually it's an avenue through which, for example, we can protect and promote health and well-being through the context of sport. But that we have to really, really make sure that, first of all, the context of sport is protecting the health and well-being of athletes. So I did the FIFA Master because I really wanted to take a more macro view of this, to really understand more the sports culture, the sports climate. And then I started working with the International Olympic Committee, and finally went on. I'm now also doing my PhD with Canterbury Christchurch University alongside my role, and really looking at focusing on both interpersonal violence, so protecting athletes from interpersonal violence, and also how sport can play a role in addressing interpersonal violence across wider society, and how we can also protect and promote health and well-being, including mental health and well-being, in and through sport.
Great. Let's talk a little bit more about that than the work that you're doing. I think that we can explaining a bit more what's the term, what health really encompass when you're talking about elite sports. My question is that I often hear that actually being a pro athlete is not that healthy. It's a lot of burden on your body. It's a lot of sacrifices. But I mean, what can you tell us about your current job, and what's really health encompasses when we're talking about elite sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concept of health is central to sport, right? It's also a lot of the times, especially on a recreational level, a lot of the reasons why people practice and participate in sport and in physical activity. And as I said, it can be extremely beneficial for health, including, for example, addressing preventing non-communicable diseases. And it can be also extremely beneficial for mental health and well-being, which mental health has like the highest disease burden of states. So it's really, there are those aspects, but exactly as you said, we have to be really, really conscious and careful at looking at what health means, particularly in the elite sporting environment, and really looking at holistic athlete health and well-being, and what does that mean, and what challenges and critical risks also the elite sporting environment can bring to athlete health. What we found to be really interesting is when we were at the Youth Olympic Games, and this also came from our recent consensus statement in 2024, we asked young athletes, so we had over 1,000 responses, and we asked young athletes at the Youth Olympic Games in Gangwon what healthy means to them in the sports environment. And what was really interesting is so many things came through about what they consider to mean a healthy environment or an unhealthy sports environment. And a lot of it came around the concepts that we see a lot of in terms of interpersonal violence. So it was things like bullying, whether something is unsafe, sleep came through a lot, mental health came through a lot, doping came through a lot. And for us really as a team, it really helped us to sort of reconceptualize what we mean when we talk about health. So instead of taking a narrow focus on health, which is really looking at, for example, the really critical and important things such as illness and injury, looking at a broader holistic concept of health. You can't have health if you're experiencing interpersonal violence because of the myriad of impacts that interpersonal violence has. And also mental health. Mental health is a core aspect of overall health. So really broadening out what it means actually to talk about health within the context of sport. And that's what, my team and I have the most amazing team in the Safe Sport unit in the IOC Health, Medicine and Science Department. That's what we're really looking at. So a much broader perspective of what is health in the elite sporting environment. And for us, interpersonal violence and addressing that and mental health and well-being are critical and central pillars.
Cool. Can you tell a bit more about your team? I mean, how many are you in the team? And maybe even tell us a bit more about what it's like a normal day at work, sort of for you, that you travel a lot. Is it mainly during competitions? Tell us a bit of how is it, your working life?
I'm smiling because I really feel like I have the best team in the world. They're fantastic. So our key pillars that we work on within the Safe Sport unit is we have Gloria who works mainly on safeguarding. She's phenomenal. She's our senior manager. She works on safeguarding. She's an Olympian as well. And she looks at all of our programs. It's really she leads the programs around safeguarding within the context of sports. So all of the work around safeguarding at the Olympic Games, supporting Olympic movement stakeholders in safeguarding. So really, really incredible work. And really, again, taking a more holistic view on what it is to safeguard. So not just policies and procedures, but looking at what we're about to publish the IOC 7P approach to interpersonal violence, addressing interpersonal violence. So really looking at promoting safe sporting cultures, partnerships, etc. And that's supported by Tina, who's an external researcher with us, but she's absolutely phenomenal and one of the leading researchers in the area of interpersonal violence in sport. We have Scott, who works on mental health and who is leading our mental health action plan and all of the many objectives that go through that. So how we protect and promote mental health in and through sport. And that led to some really amazing things, particularly in Paris. In Paris, we had for the first time the Athlete 365 Mind Zone, which was awesome. It was like a futuristic spa, and it was a different entry point for us. Effectively, it was a space where athletes could go in the Olympic Village and they could disconnect, they can decompress. We had bespoke VR guided meditation, which took them through Paris, past the Eiffel Tower, into the Olympic Stadium and helped them to practice mindfulness. It was phenomenal. And we also had the cyber abuse tools. So we utilized AI to tackle any abuse that athletes were being faced with online during the games. Then we have Katia. Katia is really working hand in hand with me on the Regional Hub Initiative. This is our baby, something that we're really, really excited about. The Regional Hub Initiative is a 10 million fund per Olympiad that the IOC announced 2 years ago now, coming up to 2 years, which is effectively the establishment of regional hubs to strengthen response to safeguarding at the local level. So our first regional hub is in Southern Africa, and the next one is also in the Pacific Islands. And we're really working on those hubs and also the establishment of a European hub. So that's fantastic. And then we have Carrie, who works with us across everything as well. So really helping us make sure that all of our communications and all of our educational tools and initiatives, all of our research is translated in a digestible form for athletes. So it's really really a fantastic team. And then we have more consultants and experts that work supporting us on our various programs as well.
So overall, how many are you then? Is it half a dozen? Or?
Well, I would say it depends, because I would say even those that are our external consultants that support with us, we see as the central part of the team. So we would have at any point around 7 to 8 of us that are really working full time on these initiatives.
Okay. Well, you named so many projects there that you're currently working on. Can you paint a picture of what a normal day at work is for you?
I don't think there's any. Every day is a different day, but really, I think my role, and this is what I'm really proud of, and what we do, especially in the HMS department, and especially with my team, is we're working on highly sensitive topics, right? So we're working on interpersonal violence and mainly and mental health and well-being. What these two topics have in common is that they're systemic public health issues. So they occur at systemic levels across society. And we see high levels in sport, either the same in terms of prevalence rate. So, for example, athletes experience mental health symptoms and disorders around the same prevalence rate as the general population. For some, it's higher, and for some, it's lower. But on the general rate, which is high, right? It's around 1 in 3. And we see the same. So interpersonal violence, I mean, it is endemic, and we know this. Everyone that's watching that works in the area of athletic safeguarding, we know the facts, the stats and the figures, and we see the same in sport. And there are some areas of higher risk, and some areas where sport can act as a protective mechanism, but only if we're doing the right work to safeguard people within the context of sport. So what my team are really, really good at, and what we love doing, is effectively trying to ensure that we're always sticking close to the evidence base. So we're basing our guidance on what we know works. So really, that's we've just done another consensus statement in interpersonal violence, which came out last year. We've got another mental health consensus statement, which is coming up this year. And to give you an idea of that, the interpersonal violence consensus statement done by experts all around the world that we published last year, we had over 20,000 citations that had to be screened in order to drill it down and come down to, okay, what are the actionable, what are the evidence-based, what is the literature telling us? So, but what the team are really phenomenal at is translating that into pragmatic, actionable solutions, which have the evidence base at their core, so that we can really create an impact, and we can really we're not shooting in the dark. So this is really, really important to us, is that translation, that knowledge translation from the evidence base into pragmatic activities, and particularly taking it from the local level up. I think that's so my role a lot of the time is really defining and helping to shape and define that strategy, and make sure that what we're doing. The other thing I'd like to say is also always seeking new ideas, and particularly taking that from the athlete experience. So really understanding and listening to what we know and what we can learn from athletes. There was recently an amazing consultation done with children all across the world. The IOC did that together with Save the Children. So really trying to understand exactly what is needed and develop strategies to address that, and disseminate that all across the Olympic movement.
Well, that's super informative. I mean, I don't know if we can choose one, but you seem very passionate when you talk about your work, right? So I wanted to know, if you were to pick one, what is it that you like the most about your work, or working in sports in general? And then you can also start thinking of what is it that you dislike. But yeah.
Yeah, I really love what I do, and I love the people that I'm doing it with. I think it's really the impact that we're having, I think, is really, really important. I honestly think working in these areas as well, and there are a lot of people from outside of the IOC, like advocates, people who are, it's an area where you really have to be passionate about these topics, because they're really challenging topics. But the community of practice that is developing, of people who are really striving, and it's again really challenging areas to work in. But what makes it incredible is knowing that you're have common goals and you're really striving for impact, that your heart is in the right place and what you're trying to do, like really having that belief in what you're doing, and the team that you surround yourself with. I think for me, that's really, really critically important. And that's why I feel really lucky with my team and the extended team of advocates and allies who are all working together to say, okay, how can we protect and promote within the context of sport? How can we centralize this? How can we make sure that sport is able to be the best that it can be for as many people as possible, by making sure it's a safe place, it's a welcoming place, by making sure that it has a holistic concept of what sports can be, that people can thrive in the context of sport. I think that's and I think, again, the flip side is of what makes it challenging. What makes it challenging is that, you know, it's really important when you're working in these areas to recognize the harm that's been done, and to recognize, you know, they're really challenging areas to work in. But that says nothing to the experience of those who have actually gone through and experienced, for example, interpersonal violence in sport. And it's at the same point extremely challenging. But knowing that really working together and co-creating, co-designing, and really building a community of practice to drive things forward. And critically, which I'm very lucky with, having the support of the leadership. So really having the IOC's full support in recognizing these topics as being central to the Olympic movement, you know, really critically, centrally important to the Olympic movement and to the IOC strategic objectives. That really is something of great importance and really supports us in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, cool. And what's really, is there parts of your work that you don't really like? If you would change if you could?
That's a really tough question. I mean, honestly, I do feel very lucky in doing what do I like to do. I don't know if there's an area that I would say that is the most I don't know. Honestly, I feel quite fortunate. If there was an area that, I'd have to think about it, but probably I don't know. I probably just try and have more time. I think a lot of the time no, I really wouldn't be able to say. I think it's just being able to have more time, basically, because what is challenging in these areas is that people, you feel like you can never move fast enough, that there's always, and working again in these topics, which are huge systemic topics, and there's so much work to be done, so much that has been done, and we stand on the shoulders of amazing individuals who have done so much before us. And but I think there's a lot of time maybe we could come under criticism that people want more to be done faster, and I understand that. I really do, because, you know, change can never come fast enough, particularly when you're talking about topics such as the ones that we focus on. But making sure that trust is won in drop list and lost in buckets, right? So making sure that you're taking each step, and that you're really analyzing that and making sure that it's the right step to take. I think that's probably the hardest part of my job, wanting to race, but knowing that we have to, you don't get a chance to get it wrong a lot of the time when you work in this area.
Kirsty, before we continue, let me just say that there's a bunch of people sending some messages here, just so you have an idea where people are watching us from. So Muscan is in Paris. There is, I think, a lady here in Vevey. The system doesn't show her name. She's watching on YouTube. She says she's a training spouse to an Nestlé employee and have a life, passion for sport, Olympics, you know, all that. When coming to Vevey, was excited about the opportunity to possibly working for the IOC. So if you want to drop your name in the comments, that will help. There's a Ruben Herrera. Can't remember where he's in. Benjamin Dicola, he said later where he's watching from. There's a dear friend of ours, Hassan El Kama, says, top, proud of you, Kirsty.
Hi, Hassan.
Hassan, we want you here, Hassan. And top man as well. So we have Renata Hodge here in Lausanne. Hello, Renata. It's been some time. Good to see you here. Who else? Joseph is watching from Zimbabwe. He says it's his first time here. There's, I think, Amanda in Paris. Rodrigo says absolutely inspiring. Not sure where he's watching from. Well, there's a few others here. So Nick, Grace, Bruno Leone. Hello, Bruninho from Brazil. So watching us as well. Renata has already a comment here. We also saw, well, she commented while you were just talking. She says, we also saw some sponsors more aware of mental health issues. Was the IOC pushing this agenda, or did they come up with that, and that further helped your department? Is there combined work being done?
I mean, honestly, I think
That's Renata's question.
yeah, thanks, Renata. Great question. And I think this is really, really key because these are also topics where there is huge interest and that kind of purpose-led partnerships. You know, we're seeing more and more the importance of that. And for us, it was really good because we have Coca-Cola as a top sponsor, and Coca-Cola have the Pauses Power campaign. And so through Powerade. And so for us, the Mind Zone and the Mind Zone that we did in Paris, we co-created that and co-delivered that together with Powerade. So it was really the Pauses Power campaign. In fact, actually, we had Emma Twigg was on the Pauses Power campaign, who is also an alumnus from my edition of the FIFA Master, Olympic medalist,
Yeah,
Olympic
she was
champion.
all over Switzerland in Portugal. Yeah.
But yeah, so actually it's a really great question, Renata. And I think this is really important as well. I mean, for us, the Athlete 365 Mind Zone and how we were able to, that was delivered and developed together with Powerade, and that co-creation and really amplification of the importance of mental health and well-being, working together with a top sponsor was really impactful. So thank you for that question.
And Kirsty, so bringing back to that topic of career, maybe career advice, I think a lot of people here admire your work, and they may be asking you, I don't know if you ever did this self-reflection, but would you know what are sort of the main skills that that allowed you to get the career that you have? So what do you think was important yeah, exactly, allowed you to go from where you were to where you are now?
I think, first of all, like courage of conviction. I think you mentioned I'm really passionate about the topics we work in. I remember when I started the FIFA Master and Pierre and Frankie said to me, oh, you're coming from a physiotherapy background. Lots of other people here are lawyers and other things, and it might be tougher for you. And actually, you know, it was really like, I think finding something that you're really, really passionate about and wanting to and sticking by that, I think is really important. For me personally, like, it's like recognizing and having the best team. No one can do everything. So in our team, we're really lucky because, you know, my skill set is probably more in the kind of strategy, diplomacy, looking at the macro level vision and seeing how we can, you know, a lot of the time we refer to it as it's like a matrix of things that we're trying to put together, because it was mentioned in here actually in the comments before. Like a lot of the time, especially with safeguarding, people think it's just policies or procedures, but changing the culture is much more than that. And it's the same for mental health and well-being. Also a topic which is hugely stigmatized across the world. There's massive variances in mental health literacy, massive variances in access to mental health care and support, not just talking about sport, but in the country level. So like, how are you know, there's so many different variables and so much. So mine is probably that kind of strategic thinking, and the sort of that's probably where my key strength comes in, which is supported by, I guess, my clinical background, but also my PhD and my master's for sure. But then I have colleagues as well, and like everybody has their different skill sets. And I think creating that patchwork of different skill sets that come together, we're really fortunate. We have that complementarity. So for example, Gloria is phenomenal at really going very deep and looking into policies and really pulling out, like, you know, absolutely incredible. So you have to have the combination of skill sets. I think that's really, really important, and recognizing that no one person can do all of that, but finding your team and your people that you can work together with. I think for me, it's been the most important thing.
Do you recruit regularly? I mean, these people that are there working with you, did you participate in the recruitment process, or they were already there when you got there?
Yeah, I have to say I was
how was
very,
it?
very fortunate. Yeah, I was very fortunate because I was able to build my team. So when I came in, I took over from Susan Grenick, who was a legend, just all around. But I was on my own, so I was able to actually build my team. So that was really, really, I was very fortunate in that. I would say though that there is just so much to do, and these areas being such a strategic priority, it is challenging because we really feel like you need to continue to build the team, but also it's quite challenging. You can't just keep growing and growing and growing. We have to create the strategy and the roadmap for that. So we're really fortunate, as I mentioned, we have a number of external consultants that support us and who for us are a central part of the team and the family as well. But certainly I would say that in general in sports, if you look at these two topics, they are topics which have hugely advanced in the last, since around 2016, I would say. And certainly across the whole sports movement, we're seeing that there is a more recognition of the need to focus attention and resources in the holistic concept of athlete health, including safeguarding, including mental health and well-being. And so there are more and more opportunities becoming available as that's recognized as being of central importance to overall athlete health and well-being. And sports culture, to be honest. I mean, there was an amazing piece of research that was done by our Olympism 365 colleagues, and they went and they asked parents like some of the reasons that the enablers and disablers of their children participating in sport, and fear of harassment, abuse, etc., ranked really, really highly on there. So we're talking about topics that are, and again, I'm a real strong advocate that we can realize the rights of everyone through the context of sport, right? So we can protect people from interpersonal violence. There are so many sports-based programs addressing gender-based violence, addressing domestic violence, etc. And the same for mental health and well-being. The positive impact of sport participation on mental health and well-being are well documented. But all of those things can only be true if we address what's inside the house first, and that's what we really look to do within the unit.
Right. But what I wanted to question, just to ask you, just going back, because you mentioned that you put together your team, is so then when you are recruiting people, and there may be some people watching that might say, dream to work with you in the future, what is it that you look for in candidates? Are there some skills that you always want them to have, or it really depends on the role that you're recruiting for? Are there some traits that for you are essential that you always look for in a candidate?
Yeah, I think I would say, first of all, the best thing about working in sport is it's a microcosm of society. So there are so many different, no matter what you're passionate about, you can normally find that role within the context of sport. So that's the first thing, which is, I think, really cool. The second thing for me personally, I mean, in the areas we work with, it's really on the soft skills, right? So we work in very specialist areas, which are very important. You really need people with the kind of the passion for the topic area is really important, and also that soft skill diplomacy, because we've tried numerous various ways to highlight these critical topics, which again are very taboo, have been historically very difficult to talk about for many reasons, and we've tried lots of different entry points to try and raise awareness of how critical these topics are within the context of sport. And as I say, we now have, we've got so much support from the IOC, and that's fantastic. And we're really, really, really pleased with that. But what I would say is that the road to getting there, it's really important to recognize and to have that soft skill set, and to know that you're working in human facing areas, right? I think one of the challenges with these topics, and historically in terms of sport, is a lot of the kind of issues that we've seen, whether it be doping, whether it be competition manipulation, whether it be corruption or other things, integrity issues, as we call them. It's all about protecting the integrity of sport. But what we're talking about, the work that we're doing in terms of interpersonal violence, in terms of mental health and well-being, overall health, is about protecting the integrity of the person, of the individual. So it's more of a human-facing role, right? So it's really tipping everything onto its head and recognizing that, you have to change the viewpoint completely. So those soft skills for me are quite essential in the work that we do.
Right. Very good. Let me just read a few other comments here for you. We had Azif Hussein saying safeguarding athletes is such an important aspect in sports, and we should absolutely have more dialogue in regards to best practices, knowledge sharing, especially in developing countries like Bangladesh. So Asif is also an alumnus of the program, a recent one. He is in Bangladesh. There's someone here on LinkedIn, doesn't really show his name. Her name says that the PinQuest app was funny and connected athletes in the village around, quizzes and violence awareness. So interesting comment there. There was another one. Benjamin Dicola asks if you observe omerta or peer pressure on mistreated persons during your research or intervention in the sports world. Do you want to comment on that?
I mean, I think there are so many barriers to, well, first of all, it is really challenging for anybody who has experienced interpersonal violence or any form of harassment and abuse to speak about their experiences. And that's for a multitude of reasons. And we could have a whole session around that. And definitely the barriers to help seeking are many. And in sport, we see that there are specific barriers to help seeking, including, big power differentials, etc., fear of retaliation. There are many challenges and we always say the onus shouldn't be on the person that's experienced the harm, right, to help seek. But a lot of the time, there are many barriers, and certainly we see that in the literature. But fear of retaliation or risk of retaliation is clearly one of them. I think that's why it's really important and this is being recognized more and more in the world of safeguarding, and the centrality of needing to co-create and co-design systems and initiatives with those who have got lived experience of interpersonal violence in the context of sport and outside the context of sport, so that you can better understand and navigate those. So it's really that co-creation is really key and critical, because certainly there are a number of barriers to help seeking. And that's why, for example, in Paris, all of our initiatives were based around trying to what we call intersect the continuum as early as possible, and to reduce the harm, and to also promote us. So the team, for example, so all of the team were trained in mental health first aid. So to be able to support, as well as obviously being fully trained safeguarding officers, to be able to recognize when somebody might be in need of further support. So really to support that early intervention and early recognition. And we also, for example, the ISC developed the mental health the SMERT, the Sport Mental Health Recognition Tool, which is a tool and the Sport Mental Health Assessment Tool. But that recognition tool is an example of a tool which has been developed and can be used all over the world. And it's a tool which helps people to recognize early on when someone might be in need of further support around their mental health and their well-being. So yes, certainly we that there are many barriers, and fear of retaliation and risk of retaliation we clearly see also in the literature. That is definitely one. And so what we try and do is develop initiatives that recognize those barriers to help seeking, recognize those risks, and try and reduce them. And critically, that needs to involve co-creation and co-design with those with lived experience.
There's an interesting comment here by Ray Lovejoy McKillen. Your IOC software to combat trolls and bullying via social media during the Olympic was great and should be adopted in sports and events. Do you want to talk just a little bit more about that? Or
thanks. Yeah, and thank you, Ray, for your support. That was So that tool was the largest program to utilize AI to address online violence within the context of sport, within a major sporting event. So that was phenomenal. All athletes at the Olympic Games Paris 2024 with a social media account were covered. So we covered 19,998 social media accounts, and all of entourage members and officials were also able to be covered. They had to opt in, but it covered. And this was really important. And again, and we're talking about something which isn't just in the context of sport. There's a really cool report called well, I'd say cool. It's a hard read, but there's a really interesting report called The Chilling, which is about the amount of online violence that journalists face, and particularly female journalists and broadcasters, and how it can effectively amount to censorship. But we know, or we heard from athletes, and we saw, I mean, you can see as a regular consumer, that athletes are being targeted by online violence, but the extent to which they were being targeted was hard to know, because the only people that know are the social media companies themselves. But we also knew that online violence causes real embodied harm, right? It's not just something that's not pleasant, but it's something that really is. Online violence is violence. So in Paris, we were able to implement this system, which not only allowed us to protect athletes from online violence. So the AI system was able to scan millions of data points in real time and detect violence which was towards athletes and officials, which was breaching the community guidelines or potentially criminal in nature. And then we were able to escalate that to the platforms to removal, and anything criminal, package the information for law enforcement. So not only were we able to protect athletes during the games, but also we were able, and this is what we're doing now, working with researchers to understand just the sheer volume, like what it is that athletes have to face. Because we have to recognize that in modern day sport, social media and an online presence and modern day sport, they go hand in hand. A lot of athletes rely on social media for their brand, for their sponsorship, to be in touch with family and friends at home. But then to be able to understand then the how that exposure is also exposing them to online violence, and see how we can protect athletes from that without having to effectively tell them to come offline, which should never have to be the answer. That was really important for us. And we saw in Paris 353 athletes and officials were targeted with violence which breached the community guidelines or was potentially criminal in nature. And that's huge.
Yeah. Someone is asking here in the chat if you have any information about the technology provider. I don't know if that was done in-house, or if that's something that you can provide, or I don't know if you even know who is behind the tech, if they're doing that with other federations or not.
Yeah, I mean, we worked with a fantastic
I don't know
provider.
if this is information that you have or can share, but if not, we just go to another one.
Well, no, in general, I have to say the system that we had in Paris worked really, really well, and it was phenomenal. And we will definitely be implementing a system, the system to address and to protect athletes from online violence in future games, such as Miko. We're already planning for that. We don't tend to mention the specific names of suppliers, but there are, if you have a look, there are suppliers out there who've been working with many different international federations, and there are lots of different systems as well. And I think this is important, right? So AI is something which is continually improving, and different models will suit different use cases. So one, for example, I was targeted with violence during the Paris Olympic Games, and the amount of what actually constitutes a level where you're breaching the community guidelines, that's pretty high. It already has to be pretty horrific to get to that level where it's breaching the community guidelines or is potentially criminal in nature. So other athletes might opt for solutions, for example, or individuals might opt for solutions where they can have a filter, for example, on their profile, which allows them to toggle and to calibrate what they would like to see, and it allows them to have more control over their own, over those systems. So there's multiple different systems out there, and I think they're all it's really, really good to have a look into those and to see what's being used. But certainly really, really think it's important to recognize that online violence, it has to be central to the work that we're doing around major sporting events and the work that we're doing to protect athletes' health and well-being.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because you were actually targeted by some online violence. In fact, you were the target of very harsh criticism by J.K. Rowling, for those who don't know, the famous author of the Harry Potter series. So I wanted really to know, how did you deal with that? Because there was a huge sort of commotion. There was a big reaction. It was everywhere in the press. Suddenly, your name was everywhere. I kind of half jokingly, I think I sent you a message that said, "Well, I would put that on my CV because when you're it gets noticed by uh, s- celebrities like that, kind of means that you're in high position, so you did well." But a bit more on a more serious note, I'm very interested in knowing how did you receive that? What happened after? Tell us about what you had to go through, and maybe I think the lessons that you learned going through that process. I think personally, but also I think professionally, right? Because once you are in the feeling the same thing that some athletes feel, and perhaps you can also utilize that into your own job.
Yeah, so yeah, it was not a pleasant experience. I think if I was told that of 353 people targeted, I was number 11 on the list of the most volume of abuse in Paris. But I have to say that I also felt really lucky because we had this system in place to address the cyber abuse, to detect the online violence. I also work for an organization that showed a lot of institutional courage and came around and protected me. My colleagues were able to continue to, what was frustrating for me was also when there's security threats, you have to step back. And that, my colleagues were able to continue the incredible work in the Mind Zone and all of the important work we had to do to support athletes, which is why we're there in Paris. And so, I mean, it definitely gave me an insight into just how, it's amazing that your phone, which is something which is so personal to you and something that you use to connect with family and friends, etc., suddenly becomes a vector for violence. And the amount and just the sheer volume is just horrendous. So you can try and shut things down, but then you hear from people all around the world, friends, etc., that, hey, are you okay? And you see how much it's snowballing. And it's a really not a pleasant experience to go through. But I considered myself quite lucky because I have a great team, because I have family who was out there also protecting me, because we had this system in place, and because I worked for an organization that had a lot of institutional courage and really, really supported me. I have to say, though, that it's not the same, and it really gave me an amazing insight into what it's like for those who are continually faced with online violence, and also those who can't step back, who have to continue because they've got a race the next day. You have to continue to go out and be in the public eye. And the amount of misinformation as well is just incredible, and you have absolutely no control over it, and it just continues to balloon. And so I was fortunate in the sense of it was a very unpleasant experience, but it had a stop date and a start date and a stop date. It was relatively short, but it really gave me a lot of, had empathy anyway, but a lot of understanding and renewed vigor and passion for supporting those who actually have to experience this every time they go into the public eye, or have a risk of this every time that they tweet because of their profile and their public presence. So yeah, it was a very humbling experience indeed.
What type of, say, abuse or violence are we talking about? For us, that's never suffered anything like that. Just some sort of criticism, like, "Hey, you're dumb. You don't know what you're talking about." They call you some names, or it can be more aggressive than that, or even more dangerous.
No, none of that breaches the community guidelines or is potentially criminal in nature. So that's what I mean. Like when you're talking about breaching the community guidelines, everyone, the system, respects freedom of speech and people's opinions, right? But it's really, so basically it's violence, threats of violence, anything that is, the abuse that we saw could either be, we saw in general across the games.
People writing threats, you and your family, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go in particularly into specifically the ones against me, but I think what we have to recognize is that the level of when something got flagged by the system, or when something was categorized therefore as abusive and had to be actioned, it had to be something that breached the community guidelines, which is a very high threshold, which means that it's not just somebody saying you're dumb, or I don't like what you're saying, or I don't like how you X, Y, Z. It's really an attack. And so that means that what that also showed for me is that there is so much that people will have to, which is still extremely unpleasant, that it gets thrown at them, which is actually, there's nothing that can be done about it. And that still is extremely and deeply unpleasant. So the need to, and for us, the integration of our cyber protection mechanisms with our safeguarding and mental health services was critical and key. And I think that also, I found that for myself, but we found that also for athletes. It was really important not just to have this system in place, but to make sure that it was fully integrated into our safeguarding, our mental health and our wellbeing initiatives, because there's so much that doesn't breach the threshold, so can't be actioned in the sense of escalated for removal or sent to law enforcement, but it's still deeply, deeply hurtful on a subjective level. So having those systems in place was really important for us.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Kirsty. There is a comment here by Neil Wallace. Says brilliant inputs. Kirsty, extremely motivating to hear all your updates. Thank you for sharing all these nuggets of gold. Your holistic and far-reaching programs are having a massive impact. Thank you. Renata has a question. I think even before you talked about your own experience, you mentioned those 300 plus criminal violences. She's asking what types of sanctions were taken against those. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so 353 individuals were impacted by online violence, breaching the community guidelines or criminal in nature during Paris. And we published that data. We're now going through all of the cache of data we're going to actually publish in peer-reviewed scientific articles so that we can sort of share, anonymized, of course, it's not going to have any personal information, but help people to understand what kind of violence was it sexist? Was it misogynistic? Was it racist? Was it violence targeting family, which I think is horrific, but we see this a lot. It's not just the person or the athlete or the individual that's being targeted, it's their family at home, and the impact that can have on someone who is trying to compete in the pinnacle sporting event or something they've trained for a lifetime, and their family's getting threatened, So again, really, we're looking at all of this data. We've published already some of it already on olympics.org, but we're now doing a deep dive into it so that we can also support other sports organizations and ourselves improve policies, systems, etc., to tackle online violence. In terms of those cases, I can't comment on any ongoing criminal cases that are going on, but certainly the abuse, those that breached the community guidelines were removed from the platform effectively. So there was an expedited channel to remove that from the platform, so to protect the athlete. And then where the criminal level was breached, I can only talk about my case, but it is still ongoing.
Great. Just a few more comments before we go to other questions. Gloria Viceras, Olympian, just as hard. I think she's enjoying it. Jonathan Hirschler, go Kirsty, amazing, innovative, and important work with an amazing team. Keep it up, please. Benjamin here asks if the IOC is open to whistleblowers. Is the IOC protecting any tool for whistleblowers, for athletes and their environments? Is there a system for that as well? I imagine there is. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so we have, during our games time, we have a full framework, including a reporting line that's actually open all year round, but specifically for safeguarding, we have the possibility to directly intervene during the Olympic and the Youth Olympic Games, or Olympic events. And we also established a team of welfare officers, so a multitude of ways through which reports can happen. So there's whistleblowing lines. And outside of games time, we're working really strongly with Olympic movement stakeholders to ensure that they are establishing systems, policies, procedures, including reporting channels, allowing for anonymous reporting, allowing for whistleblowing, etc., within their own organizations. And that's something that we're doing. So we've just completed our 2025 needs assessment of international federations, where we really go to them and we ask them, we ask for the status of safeguarding in their organizations. So 100% of them responded last time and 100% have responded this time. And we're able to then support the strengthening of those measures. And whistleblowing measures are key, and they are critical. And we certainly do have that in place during the games. And we also have that in place as an organization.
Kirsty, we're gonna hit the hour mark in about 5 minutes, so I want to be conscious of time and let you go. Don't take much of your time. So before I go to maybe the final questions, I want to ask you about education, right? Importance of formal education. You and I did the same master. We had some other friends here that participated in the live that are also alumni. I wanted to know a little bit about your experience. And now you're doing a PhD as well. So not only about the FIFA Master, but about education in general, formal education. How important is that you to pursue a career like yours?
Well, for me, it was essential, but everyone's different. But for me, it was super essential. I mean, I feel really lucky because I went from physiotherapy, so really clinical, so really one-to-one, right? That's where I see physiotherapy. I was really working as a clinician, working together in the sports sector. I did the masters, which helped me have a more macro understanding of the sports context as a whole, and that humanities, because I also at some point in the middle, I had my own company and I was CEO of my own organization as well. And so that management law and humanities was really critical for me in terms of the work that I do for the IOC, but also when I had my own business was really critical. And it really helped me to understand more from the macro. And now I'm doing my PhD, and my PhD is for me, it's actually a PhD by portfolio. So it's really alongside the work that I'm doing, and it's making sure that I'm staying really close to the evidence base. It's making sure that I have the depth of theoretical understanding, again, because the work we do is so sensitive, that I'm really thinking through all of the steps that I'm taking. And I've got two fantastic supervisors with Canterbury Christchurch University. So really making sure that I'm sticking closely to the evidence base, and that I'm deepening my knowledge and understanding on a really profound level in terms of the topics that I'm ultimately responsible for steering the work of the IOC. And so again, together with incredible colleagues. So for me, that formal education was really, really important. And I really do recommend. My brother's currently doing a master's. And he works in sport as well. And I think it's really, really important. I think sometimes we can, and particularly for me, I found myself too pigeonholed, and I've gone out like this. And I think that's that the FIFA Master in particular was really important for me to help me in the role that I do now.
Cool. Let's do 2 or 3 questions. What's the best story you have experienced thanks to your work in sport? A funny story or a big lesson you learned. It's not your favorite sporty moment yet. I'm going to ask you that's right after this. But yeah, an interesting story that you share thanks to sport.
I think I've got so many, but I think I would have to do a shout out to when I was, I've never managed to, ballet, not in the Olympics. We'll never manage to get an Olympic medal in anything. But the closest I got was I got a gold medal from the president of Singapore, President S.R. Nathan, for being the physiotherapist to the Singapore football team when we won the bronze in the Youth Olympic Games back in 2010. So I think that's the closest I'll ever get to an Olympic medal, and I think that's got to be one of my favorites.
I did not know about that. So something I learned about you. Well, something else. And what about your favorite sporting moment?
So I was going to say Johnny, because I'm a rugby fan, right? And British. So Johnny Wilkinson, the drop goal in the World Cup winning drop goal in 2003, or the Paris Olympic Games, basically all of it, because the Paris Games for me were absolutely phenomenal. Even despite what happened in terms of the cyber abuse, they were absolutely phenomenal. But being the day that it is today, I would like to say it has to be Davide Astori's goal against Inter Milan. So it's 7 years today that Davide Astori passed away. He was the captain of Fiorentina when he passed. He also played for the Italian national team. And to respect and honor Davide, I'd like to say, 7 years after his passing, it's got to be when he scored a goal away as a defender against Inter Milan.
All right. Okay. Good shout out. And to finish, I always ask this to my guests. Actually, just before I ask you this last question, I asked them to recommend a book or a podcast or YouTube channel or something. Let me just pass by some comments. New Wallets already read. There's Mario Medeiros. Oh, do we have time for one more question? There's a question here
Sure.
from Mario. How does the IOC sponsors and broadcasters partners support your division? Do they financially invest, or they support your campaigns and needs with value in kind, marketing in kind? I think Renata alluded to that before. I don't know if you want to just.
Thanks, Mario. So yeah, we mentioned before
that.
the Mind Zone in Paris was co-delivered with Powerade and the Pauses Power campaign. So that was really good. We got a great relationship with we're really fortunate for the work that we did together with Coca-Cola and Powerade as part of Coca-Cola for the Mind Zone and on mental health. And certainly we're always looking to we're really fortunate with the top sponsors. So it's really important. At the end of the day, the work that we do is all around purpose and values, and I think it's always looking to see what more we can do together. But certainly a great success story we saw with the Mind Zone in Paris, powered by Powerade.
All right. So we just passed the hour mark. So yeah, my last question to you, Kirsty, is do you have a book to recommend, or a podcast, or a YouTube channel, anything that you want to recommend to our audience that's still here with us?
I think I would say, I've forgotten the name of it, but it's the book around the Fiji Sevens. That's really good. If you've ever read it, have you heard of that book? I'll have to.
What?
It's the book around the Fiji Sevens, rugby sevens team. That's awesome. And yeah.
Oh, the Fiji Rugby Sevens. Okay.
Yeah, and the other one would probably be The Body Keeps the Score. That's a really good book as well that I really recommend. Anyone that also, I mean, those that work in safeguarding have probably already read it. It's probably a staple on the mantelpiece, but that's also another really, really good book that I'd like to recommend.
All right, thank you. I will look for the name of the first book of the Fiji Sevens, and I'll put in the comments later. But I want to say big thank you to you, Kirsty, to everybody that joined us and participated and made this interactive. And this is a lot of fun, actually. I actually much prefer their questions than mine. But yeah, it was really great having you. Here's my guest. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so
thanks everyone for listening. Thank you.
Don't go yet, Kirsty. Let me turn this off. Bye, everybody. Thanks again. We'll be here, I think, next week. We'll be announcing soon who's the next guest. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.